Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. Hope your Friday's going well. I know it's been a long week. Everyone's tired. I speak for myself. I'm tired. We're all tired. There's a lot going on. Lots of stuff on the move. So yeah, thanks again. So the Zoom personal account means I have 40 minutes. So that's all we have, which is great. It allows me to just use the 40 minutes effectively, and I've taken in account from feedback, which is great. So thank you for those who've done part one. Part two in this micro interaction session is designed more of a workshop tutorial and designed for you to make things and do things and break things, put it together, put it back together, creatively think about some of the pieces to your portfolio, in particular onboarding. And so micro interactions with onboarding, and previously we've done some UI and some UX strategies on how to do onboarding. And if you're thinking about your passion project, or you're thinking about some extra pieces to add to your portfolio, onboarding is one of those nice little UI and UX interaction pieces that allow you to show some of your skills in 3 to 4, sometimes five nice little slides. And we'll today go through a couple of techniques in micro interaction within Figma. I'll introduce you to some tools. I'll introduce you to a couple of inspirational elements to add into Figma. So should be a fun little workshops session, less talking from me, more workshopping and you individually creating some fun pieces in Figma. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we'll first, so micro interactions. And a little bit of agenda first. So some things to go over. So I'll be going through a little bit of the housekeeping. I'll talk about just, I mentioned previously, just a few of the outcomes and goals, things that we're going to be doing today. I'll do a bit of a recap on what we talked about in part one. But as I mentioned, most of today will be a little bit of a workshopping tutorial activity on onboarding interactions. And yeah, we'll have some time to share and see what you do at the end of the workshop. So the housekeeping and then the safety sort of elements to this. Sitting upright, that's something I need to do more of. Straighten my back up. Make sure you're all comfortable. Cameras will be on. And then yeah, if you mute, while I'm doing tutorials for sounds. This is an educational video which will be recorded, and 40-minute session. Break as you need it. If you need to, just turn the camera off. That's fine. And then yeah, absolutely capture any questions you might have, and I'll have an opportunity to go through some of your Figma tutorial or your Figma files. And the feedback form that I sent to some of you in the previous part one, if you could please send another version of that back to me, and the students who haven't been in part one, I'll provide that feedback form to you. Okay, today I'd like for you to build on some of the principles of micro interaction from part one, but for those who are new, that's fine. We're going to build on those, but we're going to get into some specific micro interactions that apply to onboarding, and be able to start thinking about some of these portfolio pieces to go into your website. So we'll show you how to take a recording of that interaction, create it to a reasonable size GIF, animated GIF, and put that in your portfolio and show it off. Okay. Quick little recap. for those last week, the components of micro interaction are the trigger, the rules, the feedback, and the loops. So the trigger, meaning is it triggered by your finger, your thumb swiping, pressing, holding, rolling over, that the manual trigger versus a system trigger that just sort of automates. The example of the fishing icon or the fishing example. The rules that govern that particular icon. And so thinking about gravity, if it's something that falls, or the rules are there to be broken, they're sort of really loose. But the feedback is the animation. Feedback's the fun stuff. It's the special sauce, as we mentioned in the animation. And then the loop, the how does it end? How does it then go back to its original state? So how, and we talked about timing, the element of easing out, easing in as a technique, making things pop to give a sense of a communication piece connected to a brand. We've also talked a little bit about timing, which is really key. So the example on the right-hand side of the animation that's maybe a little bit too slow and the user has to wait a bit too much for those cards to slide up. And we got into a little bit of the Figma Smart Animation tool where we understand a little bit of the start state and the end state and how we animate and create a storyboard, a story from a text can be in this position and we want it to be in this position at the other stage. And we start to stitch them together and understand how that all works from each Figma frame to frame. So today's workshop, I'm going to quickly go into introduce some just drawing tools. I understand most of you will have done a bit of drawing in Illustrator, or sorry, not Illustrator, Figma. But when we start to use the SVG or the vector graphic drawings in Figma, it's important to understand how those Bezier curves and points work in a drawing. The swiping and the drag animation is the key that we'll talk about in Figma, and I'll introduce what's called a parallax technique, and we'll dive into some fun stuff. So here's an example of something I just did, I think last night or the night before. It's built on a previous animation that I just cleaned up and made my own and just tweaked, and was able to use a tool to export it quickly into a 3.5 megabyte animated GIF. And it's quite fun and playful, and ways to do this are not as hard as you think. So things that we're going to consider within our user onboarding process are the process indicators. So the progression from one slide to the next. We're going to think about a call to action, so buttons. And we're going to think of a little bit of a message, a little bit of a illustration or a image that can go through from stage to stage. And I'm going to stop it there. And I think from here in, we just start doing some fun stuff. So what I'll get everyone to do is jump into Figma, just open up a blank file. We'll have a new file. I'll start sharing my Figma browser screen here. And sorry. Okay. I'll just pull this out for a sec. And here we go. Everyone have a browser Figma file open? Thumbs up. Good to go. Okay, let's have some fun. Here we go. Desktop. Draft, blank screen, which is great. So let's talk a little bit of the drawing tools. So your pen tool, so just P, is something that if you haven't used before, it's always good to just try and play around with, so that when you create or bring in vector-based objects, and so those file formats are what are SVG files, so scalable vector graphic, and that means it's mathematical versus it's pixelated. So if I have and it's based on points, it's based on objects that can be manipulated and changed. And I just quickly drew a mathematical Bezier curve object that can be manipulated again, can be distorted and pulled. And this is just something that you can get comfortable doing by playing around with the pen tool. So what I'll explain a little bit of what I've done is I've created an anchor point, and that's what happens when you just click it and create a point. So it's anchored in, and I can, if I hit shift, I can create a straight line and a 45. So it snaps to the 45s. So that's my straight line. If I wanted to then create just a box, I could sort of, quickly grab a box. It allows you to, and you notice in the top left-hand corner, I've got, there's a thin line in between, in between, and I can still edit this. And if I want to just leave it for now, I can hit done. So now I've got my other tools on the left-hand side. And I can move this around, and I have the stroke, but I also have the fill, and I can, I can just create simple shapes through these tools here, but I can also start to draw, and I can start to, if I hold shift on a 45 and keep holding it down, you can see these are called Bezier curves. And so what they do is they create a mathematical curve, which you can then, and I'm holding down my mouse as I do this, and you can start to see that, well, okay, I'm gonna create some waves, and I can go in and I can change these. So I can play with the center anchor, but I can also play and pull these elements around and move them around. So it takes a bit of time to practice, but it's an understanding of when you play with scalable vector graphics, they're editable. So when you bring in icons, when you bring in illustrations, as we'll do shortly, these are editable. You can change, you can start to really manipulate them and make them your own, which is tons of fun. So that is a quick sort of introduction to the pen tool, of which we're now going to build on creating and finding some interesting illustrations and some tools to play with. So I'm gonna delete this, and let's just start creating our first frame. I will pull in, I'll do an SE size just because it's a bit smaller. You can create, your own phone size, but let's pick a phone size. So in your frame, just hit F, and you'll on the right-hand side have your phone sizes. So, the 13, 11, iPhone 11s, you can do Android, it's no big deal. But pick a phone size just so that we can build on the onboarding process piece. So here we have our first board, and we're going to use some tools to first grab some patterns, grab just a background. And what I'm going to do is go to patterns, pattern pad. I'll, if you want to navigate to this, let's just grab some background images. get to patternpad.com. Let's go into the editor. And this is a fun little way to start to create maybe patterns for your branding, patterns for backgrounds. You can create icons with this. But if I just click this, then the default is in the Bauhaus. I can randomly generate a pattern, which is really fun and interesting. I'm going to just change some of these colors. I might just pick that as the second background, a little bit monochromatic. I can adjust the columns. So I want to get this a little bit smaller. There's quite a few of these. Let me try something like that. That's sort of like a horizontal mobile version or sort of size. And you can play around with, making this different patterns. You can get into triangles, pick whichever you want. I think, whichever one you pick, then just create 3 different versions of it. So what we're going to do is I am going to, I'll take this. So I'm going to download this. So I'm going to download this, and this becomes you can download this as an SVG. So you have your format of a scalable vector graphic, a JPEG, or a PNG. And the scalable vector graphic is the fun one that we can start to manipulate and play with. Going back to our Figma file, you can see that on the width, we have 320 by 568. And what I'll do is I'll bring down the width, the length actually. So that's the width. So I'm gonna go, 500 pixels. You can always scale this down. Don't worry too much about this width. And download. That's gonna throw that into my downloads folder. I'm going to go down. I'm gonna go back to my Figma file, and I will just drag and drop that. Grab that SVG, and here it is. I'll just zoom out, and I'll fit that. Put that in there. Now, I'll wait a couple minutes till everyone's up to this point here. I'll just stop it there. So pick a couple of patterns. It's sort of so pick three versions of that same. Well, it doesn't mean the same. We want 3 different same size patterns. So go from circles to triangles to something else. But we're going to create a stage. We go 1, 2, 3. So what that means is, and I'll do this here. I might change it to this actually. So then downloads, I'll do 600. There's my second one. And let's go into this one. Download. All right. This is stage 1. Sorry, I'm just gonna create another one. Well, not H. I'm gonna do SE. SE. Yes. Stage 2 is going to be, this one. Pattern, group. Okay, we're good. And I'll make my third. Oops. through there. And 3. So I haven't really done anything special here. I'm sort of just grabbing, sorry, I'm going to put that. Creating 3 states. So this is where the fun stuff begins. And so you'll notice that when I break this apart in the layers, like there's a lot of individual vectors. So if you click on them, you'll see, okay, like this is, this is this triangle, this square, this square. It's made up of a grouping a whole bunch of different vectors. And the naming of those files is what's really important here that we'll start to play with further. We have those 3, and again, I'll stop just for a minute. Just everybody, is everyone caught up to have just 3 files? Thumbs up. So what happens now is we have 3 separate stages, and the naming of the layers is important, but we're going to go into prototype, and we're going to drag the first frame to the second frame, but instead of tap, we're going to do drag. We're going to drag it because we want to play with just that swiping technique of your thumb on a phone, right? And we have animation, so it'll navigate to the second one. But what we'll want to do here is we're gonna move in. So we're gonna swipe across. Now we're gonna swipe from this left. So the second stage is the second frame is gonna come in to the left. Here's where the fun stuff comes in. So you can have smart animate matching layers. So what that does is any layer that is named the same, it's going to replace it and animate it automatically. And so I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to do the same thing for here. I'm going to, sorry, just grab this, and it'll default to the same one. So if you go left, so you see how this comes in from the left and this comes from the right. So you want to swipe. That's where if I wanted to go from here back to this one to swipe to the left, I would do the opposite. I would sort of bring it in from this direction. And then I can, again, bring this back. So I can swipe to the left, swipe to the left. And so now what happens if I play that is the vectors on the layers that come in will, what are you doing? I've done something, stuff something up here. On, drag, navigate in, move. Groups. Maybe this is it.
Yeah, gotta delete that thing, I think. If you delete that frame, it works.
Which frame? Sorry.
So delete ungroup the pattern pad.
Ungroup this one.
Oh, no, just just that one. Just a frame inside the frame.
Is everyone? I'll take that out.
Or maybe just instead of maybe use on click, because like it's the same thing as drag, but just without the mirror.
Yeah. So you can so I wanted to introduce you to the idea of if you create the same layers and when you do the drag and you do a swipe, it starts to ease it and ease in out on the motion. So you can use this technique in the micro interactions for like deleting an email on Gmail, right? You swipe it to the left to delete and you swipe it to the right. The fun stuff with parallaxing, which is something that we'll do next. Did everyone get the shapes to start changing and morphing? Yeah, I've let me take some of those. I'll just remove. I've got too many of these. I'm gonna take this one out. Take this one out. This one out. You can do tap or drag, but that's fine. But it's the smart animate matching layers that's really fun to start playing with as far as come on. I'm missing something here. Pattern one, pattern one, pattern one. Left, yes, on drag. Nope. Doing something. All right, let's scratch that one. I'll show you. Eddie.
Mine's working, if you want to see.
Yeah, show me how it's supposed to look, because I've done this before. I'm just like, I'm looking like a tit right now.
I can't share though, for some reason. I can't share my screen though.
You're not the host.
Yeah. Running out of time. Boo. Go ahead. You're not host. So I will show you the parallaxing effect.
So
I actually have some demos that I've just done that I'll show you.
is that how it's supposed to look?
Yes. So what happens is it takes all those vectors and goes, what was the layer before? What's the layer in between? And does it afterwards. So put me back over to host. I'll show you how, I'll show you how this, this works. So here's the fun stuff with the parallaxing element. Okay. If you can put me back over to host, Eddie. Good to go. Thank you, sir. Okay. I'll show you what's possible, and what I did is I navigated to this site called Vecteezy, and I picked out a landscape. So if you just wanted to create a landscape, and I picked out some of these free ones, what happens is, I picked this one that's just quite nice, and so it has these nice vector illustrations. I pulled that in to this file here, and before I demonstrate this, I'll demonstrate a little bit of what parallaxing is. So parallaxing is the illusion of space and motion and depth. So some examples of great parallax are this website right here, where you have elements that are moving at different rates. So you have this grape on the right-hand side, the green one, that's moving a little bit differently from the typography in the middle, and then the darker grapes in the back. And you, as you scroll, they scroll at different rates, and it sort of has this element of depth, and has a really nice interaction when you look at websites. And it's a fun way to create depth. It's a fun way to create a parallaxing effect, particularly with this tool. So I brought in that illustration, and what I did was I moved the trees. So anything in front of you is going to move faster, right? So, and then the middle ground is going to move a little bit slower, and then the background is going to move even slower. And so I just move things along. And so if I play this, so what happens now is I'm just moving my thumb, but you can see how it starts to move at different rates. And you can create this nice motion effects of a landscape. So the trees moving faster. I probably want to tweak that a bit more. So that the trees, I think I'll want them to move a little quicker. The middle ground to move a little bit slower, and the trees can move, and the clouds can move a little bit easier. So when you use the drag effect and you create the same layers between that, you can start to have this fun way of introducing text. So I started putting text behind the trees, and the trees can sort of move in. And so the other fun one to do, and I'll show where we can build on this, is to then start to play with some fun animation. Well, here's some of the stuff I was goofing around as well, is when you have
While we're waiting, with that parallax effect, are they all the trees and mountains in different layers? Is that how you did it, or how does Figma know which layer to, or which elements to move faster or slower?
Yeah, I did that. I'll show you. So this is, I took, if you had a type, you can sort of swipe and move it across and animate it. I'll show you how I did that. And here's the original file. And when you start double clicking, you go deeper into it. So this is the grouping of the trees, right? So I moved these along. I moved, see, I can see all these layers. There's a lot of layers, but you can group sections. So I grouped the trees, and then I grouped the mountains, and then I grouped the sky. And so I grabbed those three as my three parallaxing elements, and I moved them along. So I moved, if I double click, yeah, well, now I'm into this guy. I mean, if I wanted to move from right in there, so you create these stages. And so I could create 5 of these, and it could slowly move across. And if I wanted to put some type in between, you can introduce that. And then you start to add your elements of your pagination, so your elements of your slides. So if I wanted to create 4 slides, you'd go from 1 to 2. And it's a really great way to bring in some animation, bring in your swiping of the UX interaction, add your buttons. And the fun one that is really great, which I started playing this one as a template, is that this is made up of a lot of funky stuff. If I take the clipping content out here, you can see all of these elements. The key to the animation is that they're named the same. So you have a house front. And if I look at this file here, it's house front, right? And in the third one, it's like the house front layer is there as well. So here I took, so if I play this.
And the concept of having different rates of movement is how much off the screen they are. So basically how much they move between one screen to the other creates the speed or the difference.
Well, yeah, your thumb controls the speed, right? Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're talking about?
No, just going back to the trees, like, how different,
Yeah.
If you want different, I guess, elements to move at different speeds between the transition, you would move them or move them across the screen between, like, for different distances. So basically, if something travels further from a distance between one screen and another, it moves faster.
The closer it is, the more speed. Like if you're ever on a train and you're going by the train, everything is just whipping really fast in front of you. And then everything in the middle ground is moving a little slower. And then of course the trees in the sky a little bit slower. So the parallaxing effect really works well in that animation tool. And so the last thing before we wrap up is a tool that is, I sent this to Situ, is a browser-based tool that allows you to quickly, I'll put this in the chat, capture your recording and then convert it right to a GIF on a browser. And it really crunches it really well. And sorry if it's Mac. But if you want to do recordings to animated GIFs in the browser, this one is great as well. And some other beautiful tools for getting vector-based illustrations that you can start to play with. I'll pass this on here as well. And some other resources. Yeah, we talked about pattern pads, which is great for